Okay, well, let's keep praying for June. And is Lexi doing a little better? She's okay. Okay. Not there yet. Okay, well, we need to keep praying. We're on number 448. And these two songs, I don't remember the last time we sung them here at our church, Day by Day. And then the one we're singing at the end is, I know it. What's that? Sands of Time are sinking. When's the last time you sung that one? Anybody? Okay, you're going to get to. You'll probably know it, but it's been a while. So, but they're very fitting to the Psalm 39. So let's go ahead and let her play the first line a little bit, and then we'll start with verse 1. 448. Here we go. Day by day, and with each passing moment, strength I find to meet my trials here, trusting in my Father's bestowment. I've no cause for worry or for fear. He whose heart is kind beyond all measure gives to each day what he deems best, lovingly in part of pain and pleasure, mingling toil with peace and rest. Every day the Lord himself is near me, with a special mercy for each hour. All my cares he fain would bear and cheer me, he whose name is Counselor and Power. The protection of his child and treasure is a charge that on himself he laid. As thy days, thy strength shall be in measure. This the pledge to me he made. Now that you have the tune down pretty well, be thinking of the words. These are really special words that we're singing. Help me then. Help me then in every tribulation, so to trust thy promises, O Lord, that I lose not faith's sweet consolation, offered me within thy holy word. Help me, Lord, when toil and trouble meeting, ere to take as from a father's hand, one by one the days, the moments fleeting, till I reach the promised land. Okay, thank you very much, Patty. We'll put that aside until after our prayer time, and before we leave tonight, we'll do the sands of time are sinking. We're in Psalm 39 tonight, and there's a outline back there if anybody didn't get one, and there should be a prayer sheet back there too. Dave, you can grab one for. Are you going to be staying with us? Okay. All right, wonderful. Psalm 39. Let's read through it first, and then we'll go into our message. Now notice the title, To the Chief Musician, even to Jeduthun, a Psalm of David. I said, I will take heed to my ways, that I sin not with my tongue. I will keep my mouth with a bridle, while the wicked is before me. I was dumb with silence. I held my peace, even from good, and my sorrow was stirred. My heart was hot within me. While I was musing, the fire burned. Then spoke I with my tongue, Lord, make me to know my end, and the measure of my days, what it is, that I may know how frail I am. Behold, you have made my days as a handbreadth, and my age is as nothing before you. Truly, every man at his best state is altogether vanity. Surely every man walks in a vain show. Surely they are disquieted in vain. He heaps up riches and knows not who shall gather them. And now, Lord, what do I wait for? My hope is in you. Deliver me from all my transgressions. Make me not the reproach of the foolish. I was dumb. I opened not my mouth because you did it. Remove your stroke away from me. I am consumed by the blow of your hand. When you with rebukes do correct man for iniquity, you make his beauty to consume away like a moth. Surely every man is vanity. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear unto my cry. Hold not your peace at my tears, for I am a stranger with you, and a sojourner, as all my fathers were. O spare me, that I may recover strength before I go hence and be no more. Wonder if, Dave Marsh, would you look back in the office or look in the lobby and see if I left my red cup? If I left my red cup back there somewhere? Okay, I hope I did. Thank you. Well, good evening. Welcome to have you guys here tonight. Yes, do they have? Did you get a copy of the message? Okay, very good. Thank you. Oh, what a rescue you are to me. I don't want to have a dry message tonight. That's for sure. Now, when I was in college, I sang in the Oratorio Society at BJU. And I don't remember which oratorio it was because we had a different one every year. One of the things that I thought was the greatest musical number I ever participated in was the Messiah. Well, this was not the Messiah. It was one of the other ones that had this passage in Psalm 31, verse 6. I could sing that line to you, but I won't scare you with my singing tonight. Surely every man walketh in a vain show. Surely they are disquieted. And then he goes on to talk about their ways are vanity. And you see the word vanity mentioned several times in this psalm. And it's amazing how much the scriptures have been put to music down through the centuries and how many different passages have been put to song. Now, so we're calling this the phantom of a vain show. We get that out of verse 6. Well, as we go along, you understand more what that is talking about. But as we go through our introduction, I want you to put yourself in the place of this psalmist and look into your own life, experiences that you have had, or maybe even are having now, that you can relate to what the psalmist is saying here. So, have you ever been frustrated by how brief and futile life can be? I think we all have gotten frustrated. The lack of accomplishments. What were your goals? Some of you are still young, but those of us who are further along in years, have you attained every goal that you had for your life? Probably not. The lack of accomplishments, sometimes the failures, our goals unattained, the heartaches, the pains, and the troubles. Life can be full of those. Moreover, have you ever been so upset, troubled, concerning about what's happening to you and how people are treating you? And sometimes you might even be thinking how the Lord seems to be unavailable to help you out of all your dilemmas. That you must express yourself or you will burst. So I just have to get this out. I'm holding it in. And I need to express myself. Yet, you don't want to dishonor the Lord, and you certainly don't want to blaspheme him, nor do you want to give unbelievers a chance to mock you or your God by complaining in front of them. And that's what David was going through here, as we'll see in this psalm. Then if you've been through any of that in your life, or maybe you're currently going through some of these things, you can relate to what David is saying in Psalm 39. Now, you may think it's kind of a depressing psalm, but actually I think it's a very beautiful psalm, especially the middle section of it where he talks about our lives, how brief they are, and how futile they are, and how desperately we need the help of God in our daily walk with Him. I have a quote here from one of the commentators that I've used. He says, it is the sorrowful complaint of a heart, David's heart here, of course, not yet subdued to a perfect resignation. Otherwise, he hasn't quite given himself over to fully accept all that he's going through in his life. And he's talking to God about it. He's doing the right thing. When we have concerns and we're upset, why are things happening the way they are? Where are we supposed to go with those thoughts and those concerns? Well, don't tell your wife or your husband or your friend or your neighbor. Tell God. Tell God what you're going through. You say, well, He already knows. I know, but He wants you and me to express that. Because as we express it, we reveal our heart, and we can reveal our desires, and we can get the help we need from the only person that can really help us and really get us through these problems that we're dealing with. So reading through what he had to say, and I won't interrupt it again. It is the sorrowful complaint of a heart not yet subdued to a perfect resignation, but jealous with a godly jealousy, lest it should bring dishonor upon its God, and longing for light from heaven to scatter its doubts. So David's heart was troubled, yet he didn't want to say things in front of unbelievers that would bring dishonor upon God. So he kept quiet. He kept quiet. And when he talked to the right one. He talked to God Himself. And that's what you and I need to do as well. So the theme of this psalm is the frail and fleeting nature of our lives. And boy, my life, I don't feel my age. I mean, I sometimes I do. When I've been sitting for a while and I try to stand up, some of you know what I'm talking about. Things get tight. But yet the years have flown by so quickly. I say, where have they gone? Where have they gone? And this is what David's talking about here. Yet the Lord does assiduously, as one commentator described it, carefully disciplines us the way we need it, such as a creature. We could compare this psalm to Job chapter 7, especially Job's cry where he said to God, "Let me alone, for my days are just a breath. Please leave me alone for a while." You know what Job was going through, chapters 1 and 2. That was a horrific experience that he had. "What is man that you do make so much of him?" Job said. But David does not ask that question in an arrogant fashion, but with a consistent loyalty, as you'll see in verse 1. The loyalty he has to God, and also his faith, as we will see down in verse 7. The kind of question asked in this psalm finds its complete answer that dispels any confusion. This is what we as Christians need to look at. The complete answer to this psalm is not found here in this passage of Scripture, but it's found in the death, burial, the incarnation, the death, burial, and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. That's where the full answer is brought forth, because Christ brought life and immortality to light through what He accomplished. The Old Testament believers saw a picture, a glimpse of these truths, but they never fully grasped the full implications of it. That remained until Christ came and revealed these things as plain as possible. This psalm has 4 divisions. So we'll see verses 1 to 3. That's David's protest that he pents up within himself. He holds it inside till he's about ready to burst from holding it in. Secondly, verses 4 through 6, the fleeting life that he experiences. And then verses 7 to 11, the difficult discipline that he's going through. And then in the last 2 verses, his small petition that he makes to the Lord. I'm going to skip the next paragraph because that's not that germane to the content of the psalm. I'm looking at the title of the psalm. This is the first time we see the word Jeduthun in the Psalms. It's dedicated to Jeduthun, who was one of the 3 musical leaders of Israel. And I have some details there, and you can look at those later. You don't need to worry about it right now. But Asaph was another one, and I have the 3rd one listed here too somewhere. I thought I did. Maybe I don't have the third name. But he's one of the, Asaph and Heman. Asaph and Heman and Jeduthun were the three. One was from each of the three sons of Levi. Levi had three sons, and the sons of Merari, the sons of Kohath, and the sons of, anybody remember what the third son's name was? Don't worry about it if you don't. But each son was represented by a musician, a singer from each of those Levite sons. And so this was one of them. So you see, these psalms were musical. They were intended to be sung. Instruments were intended to be played with them. And people were supposed to sing these psalms. And I have a book at home that is every one of the 150 psalms put to music. I wish that we would someday start using something like that and sing some of them on Sunday mornings, so learning some of the psalms by singing them. You like that idea, don't you, Paul? I think you've mentioned that to me before. They're wonderful. And we're singing the words of Scripture when we do it. All right, so let's look at the pent-up protests, verses 1, 2, and 3. In verse 1, he talks about his mouth is muzzled. It's muzzled, like with a bridle, lest he sins with his mouth by saying something that might bring reproach on God's name. He doesn't want to sin, he says there in verse 1. He's going to keep his mouth as with a bridle. And lest I give wicked people, the wicked are before me, they're around me, I don't want to give them a chance to deride God's name or mock me further as a follower of the Lord. And then he talks in verse 2 about his speech, how it is bound up. I was dumb with silence. There's a threefold emphasis here. The word dumb in the original has the idea of being bound up. So if your mouth or your tongue is bound up, you can't talk, right? So that's the idea of the word there. He's bound up with silence, and then he is silent. He is bound up and he is silent. He restates his resolve in verse 9 also. Look down at verse 9 where he says, I was dumb. I did not open my mouth. So twice in the psalm, he says basically the same thing. Nothing good resulted from his silence, because he says there in verse 2, I held my peace even from good. Notice the word even is in italics. That means it's not in the original. So different translators have translated this in different ways. They've understood it different ways. I have come to the conclusion that the idea of what he's saying there in the middle line there is that nothing good has resulted from my silence. It was to no avail. I kept quiet, but it didn't do me any good to keep quiet. And then the only thing that increased, he says, is my pain, my sorrow, my pain. Then we go to verse 3, and he talks about his heart became hot. It was heated. You know, when you hold in your emotions, I remember talking about this with Pastor Rick recently. He was talking about how some people deal with anger. In fact, Saturday at our men's Bible study, breakfast and Bible study. By the way, if you don't go to that breakfast and Bible study, the first Saturday of every month, I want to encourage you to go. It's very, very helpful. Last week we talked about anger. And some people blow up. They explode with anger. We know that's wrong. Other people hold it inside, like David is doing here. And that's not good either, because then it will lead to problems later on. If you keep holding it inside, you never properly deal with it. So that's what David was doing here, and nothing good resulted. The only thing that increased was his pain. He had a heated heart. My heart was hot in me. The center of his thoughts is his heart, where his thoughts, his feelings, and his acts of will come from the heart, and it became hot. The fire was burning during my musings and my meditations. The fire was burning. Finally, he spoke with his tongue. He released his speech. So that's what we see in the first three verses. Now, notice the paragraph here before we get to the second section. However, when David does finally speak, notice he does so with respect and patience. He talks to God, but he does it with respect and patience. His first prayer is that God would help him to effectively learn the lesson about how brief his life is and how important it is to live his life productively for the glory of God and not to waste his life. And so he talks about God giving him the understanding to fully comprehend how brief life is and how important it is to use every minute. Reminds me of the 90th Psalm when Moses wrote the 90th Psalm, and he talked about the brevity of days in Psalm 90, verse 12. So the fleeting life. Now, when he finally expressed this pent-up anger in him, frustration in him, he didn't start talking to people and venting to people. He vented to God. Patiently and reverently, he vented to God. He released his thoughts to the Lord. So notice this fleeting life in verses 4 to 6. We also look at it, the last part of verse 11 and also verse 12. And it reminds me of James chapter 4, verses 13 and 14, a pretty well-known verse. James 4, 13 and 14, he says, "Go to now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city, and we will continue there a year, and we will buy and sell, we will get gain. Whereas you don't know what shall be tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away." Same thoughts as we have here in Psalm 39. What is your life? And so this fact becomes the most significant emphasis in this psalm. David piles expression upon expression in order to get his point across. Are you and I going to get this message? Let's look at all that he said about this brevity of life in verses 4, 5, and 6. I've tried to find every part here in the psalm that relates to this thought. I put them here together pretty much in order that you come to them. In verse 4, he says, "Make me to know my end. Make me to know the end of my life." Look ahead sometime when you tend to be wasting away time, when you tend to be being unproductive in your life. You know you're wasting a lot of time on things that you shouldn't be wasting it on. Try to look ahead to your death day. And then what will people think of you and say of you as they look at your tombstone? What would they put there for a statement on your tombstone? Or more importantly, if God were to write the epitaph on your tombstone, what would God say in that day? We need to think about the end of our lives while we're not there yet, so that we can use our life to the glory of God while we're here. So make me to know my end, the end of my life, my time on earth. Then he says, what the measure of my days is. And what does he say about the measure of his days? They have a limit. This is the only place in the Bible where this word measure is used of the days of a person's life. Any other time it's using of a literal measurement of something. This is the only place in the Bible, in the Old Testament, where this word measure is used, the measure of your lifetime. And it's right here in this passage. And then he goes on in verse 4, the point is how temporary my life is. It's going to come to an end. God has made my days, the measure of my days. What does he use for a measurement of the years of his life? What's the word that he says there in verse 4? What's a handbreadth? Can you show me? A handbreadth. That's pretty short, isn't it? What is that, about maybe 3 or 4 inches? Something like that? That's not very long. Not very long. Dr. Jerry Tetreault, wonderful man. He was the president of he was founder of our college, and he was a president for many, many years. He ordered some specially made yardsticks that had Psalm 90 verse 12 on it. And teach me to measure the measure of my days. Psalm 40 verse 12. Psalm 90 verse 12. And he used that in giving messages. He brought that yardstick out and talked about the length of your life and how short it really is. That's even shorter. He talks about a handbreadth here. God has made my days to be measured in handbreadth, verse 5. My lifetime in God's sight before him is really nothing. It's nothing before you. It's so short, so brief. He goes on to say, every man at his best is all vapor, breath, and vanity. Look at the last part of verse 5. Every man at his best state is altogether vanity. You say, that's kind of pessimistic. But isn't that what the book of Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiastes, isn't that what it's all about? The vanity of life? Solomon tried everything in life, riches, wealth, pleasure, everything. And at the end of it, after analyzing it, he came to the conclusion, it's all vanity. There's no real purpose in life apart from God and apart from the meaning that God gives to our lives as we live our lives for him. So every man at his best is all vapor, breath, and vanity. This same word that's rendered vapor, breath, and vanity, that's the one that's used in Ecclesiastes over and over and over again. It's exactly the same word many, many times. And it's used here in verse 5, and it's used again in verse 11. Then we look on. Every man walks about his daily activities. We're in verse 6 now. He walks about his daily activities like a mere image. The word vain show, the word in the Hebrew is the idea of an image of something. Now, an image can be pretty, right? But the image is not the real thing, is it? And we were made in the image of God, but we aren't God. We reflect his image if we're living properly, but we are not God. We're not the real thing. The image is just that. It's an image. So here he's comparing our lives to be just like an image, not the real thing. It's just temporary. It's so fleeting. It's gone before you know it. I gave you Genesis 1, Genesis 9, where it talked about man being made in the image of God. The King James renders this expression, every man walks in a vain show. It almost looks like you're putting on some kind of a performance. NASB renders, every man walks about as a phantom. But you get the idea. It's just an image. It's just an image. It's so fleeting. It's so temporary. People make an uproar, commotion, and are boisterous. Verse 6. Surely they are disquieted in vain. And the word vain there has the idea of vapor, breath, or vanity again. It's the same word found in verse 5 as well. What is all this hustle, this pomp, this circumstance, this fuss? For what? Think about the Super Bowl on Sunday. Boy, was there a lot of hoopla made about the Super Bowl? They talked about it for several weeks ahead of time. I don't even watch the sports news 2 weeks ahead of Super Bowl because that's all they want to talk about. This might happen or that might happen or this person or that person. I might watch the real thing except for the halftime. I didn't watch the halftime. Did anybody watch the alternative? That was rock music too, but I guess it was better. At least it was from a moral perspective. But anyway, they make such a show. But in the end, what is it? What is the value? There are some values, but in the real scheme of things, it doesn't really matter whether Seattle won or whether I know who they played. Yes. Patriots. Boy, I was rooting against the Patriots. You better believe it. They've won enough Super Bowls already. And so I was rooting for Seattle. Plus the fact New England has won 6 Super Bowls. They're the only team other than my Pittsburgh Steelers that have won 6. And I don't want them to get to number 7 until if Pittsburgh ever can get back there again, I'd like to see them be the first ones to win the 7th one. So I have an ulterior motive there. But all that's in the real scheme of things is just vanity. It doesn't really make a difference with what's really important in life. He goes on to say, look at letter I there, found in verse 6 also, people can heap up wealth and riches, possessions, and all these other things, but we can't keep them. He says, we don't know who's going to gather them up someday. Who's going to inherit all that you have? You say, well, I'm going to give it to my relatives. What are they going to do with it? Are they always going to make wise choices with them? And you say, well, I'll give it to the Lord's work. Well, that would be a good thing. I think you ought to include the Lord's work in your inheritance. You ought to plan for that. You ought to put it in your will and put it in your arrangements I've done that already, and I want to go back and make sure I look at it again, make sure it's exactly the way we want it to be. At least put it to some good use. But you don't know who will gather up all your riches and what they'll do with it when you're gone. Every man, he says in verse 11, is a mere breath and vanity. On this earth, we humans are mere strangers. Look at verse 12, the last part of verse 12. He said, I am a stranger with you and a sojourner. A sojourner is somebody who lives somewhere temporarily. The patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were just sojourners in the promised land. They never got to own it. The only property Abraham owned was what? Do you remember? A tomb for his wife, Sarah. That's the only plot of land he owned in the whole promised land. God promised to give it to him. Did God lie? No, because he has given it to him. Many years later, over 400. How could Abraham have imagined, except God told him in chapter 15, that his descendants would be in Egypt for, I think the number might even have been given for like 400 years. And then I'll bring them out and they're going to get this land. So he had told Abraham, you're not going to see inheritance of it, but it will happen. It will happen. But despite all these facts about our vain and temporary life, you say, okay, you've been pessimistic enough. Let's get to something a little different. Well, I'm sorry, but it gets a little more dire in verses 8, 9, 10, and 11, because now David talks about, I'm being disciplined by God while I'm here. He says in verse 8, my sin has caused some of my problems. He said, deliver me from all my transgressions. Don't make me the reproach of the foolish. And then he goes on to say, don't allow me or your name, your reputation. That's what he's most concerned about, God's reputation, to bear reproach because of the foolish people. He doesn't want to give them an opportunity to reproach the Lord. When a pastor fails, I just heard someone talking about a pastor just recently who had been in their church for many, many years, and they found out after years had gone by, he had done some very immoral things, and it just ruined his life and his testimony. In fact, he ended up in jail over it. Isn't that sad? Whose name gets hurt the worst in a situation like that? God's name. Because he was representing God to other people. People looked to him. People trusted in him. People believed he was serving God as his under shepherd. And he failed God. And there have been many, many people down through the centuries who have failed the Lord and have allowed God's name to be reproached. David did not want that to happen. He goes on to say, you have done it. Look there in verse 8 again. Deliver me from my transgressions. Make me not the reproach of the foolish. I was dumb. I was quiet. I opened not my mouth. Why? Because you have done it. What's happening to me? I know, God, you have brought into my life for a reason. You have a purpose for bringing this into my life. So the next time we're going through troubles, realize if God has brought it into your life, in my life, he's doing it for a reason. He's going to make more out of us. He's going to honor his name more through the experiences we're going through. So David understands God has done it. You have done it. Therefore, I'm going to keep quiet. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to take it out on other people around me. Sometimes what we do is take it out on our spouses, our kids, our co-workers when we get frustrated. Don't do it. Take it to God and realize God is doing something special in your life. Trust him through it. You are trying to, David's saying, you're trying to teach me some very important lessons. I have to learn those lessons. But I seriously need help. That's what he says at the end of verse 9. I open not my mouth because you have done it. Please, then, he goes on to say in verse 10, remove your stroke, your discipline, your chastening rod. Remove it away from me. I think I'm learning my lesson, the Lord. Please, is it time? Will you remove the rod from me? I am consumed by the blow of your hand. Do you see how David talks to the Lord? When's the last time you prayed like this? These Psalms are sample prayers for you and I to pray. when we're having hard times, do we really pour out our heart like openly like this and say what you're really thinking and how you're really hurting and how you're wondering, how can this be, God? Why is this happening the way it is? When's it going to let up? When am I going to see the light at the end of the tunnel? Because God knows what we're thinking in our hearts anyway, so why don't we share it? Why don't we pray about it? Openly pray about it. I think sometimes if in our prayer times someone would pray in words like this, we would all, what kind of a Christian are you? Do you see what I'm saying? And yet this is the right way for a believer to pray. Of course, David didn't do it in front of other people. He did it directly to the Lord himself. And then he says, finally, you do chasten men, especially believers, for their iniquity. He uses various rebukes and corrections. Look at verse 11. When you with rebukes do correct men for his iniquity, you make his beauty to consume away like a moth. Now, don't misunderstand what he's saying. He's not saying that the moth is consuming away. It's what the moth is eating. What does a moth eat usually? Clothing. And he's consuming it. Now, how fast does a moth do that? Just in one day? Does he eat the whole thing? It's usually clothes that you've stored away and you haven't looked at it for a while. Now we have cedar chests, and that's why cedar chests were invented. You could put your ancient garments in there and keep them for long periods of time. And the smell of that wood, if anything would get in there, they wouldn't be able to do any harm because the cedar chest. Anybody have a cedar chest at home? We do. Nobody has them anymore. I used to talk to young single girls. I was given the task when I was selling cookware to have young single working girls, had to be working girls, as my clients. And one of the spiels that I would make as I would talk to, and it was great cookware. I didn't mind selling it. It really was good quality. In fact, we are still using the same cookware I sold to my wife when we were engaged. She was one of my clients. And her mother brought some cookware too. And we're still using it to this day. We really are. Some of the handles have broken because putting them in the oven, and they'll send you free handles. It's lifetime guarantee. We've been using that cookware. We'll probably give it to our kids when we pass away. It'll still be good. So it was good cookware. But I would tell these young ladies, if you buy this cookware, we'll give you a set of china. I know you're not married yet, but you can put it in your hope chest. Put it in your hope chest and keep it there. Girls used to do that. I don't know if they do such things anymore or not, but put them in their hope chest. And we gave them a set of cutlery along with it too. That's off the subject. I apologize. Okay, so let's go now down to the end here, to the small petition that he makes. Look at verse 7. He says in verse 7, this is the positive side of the psalm. God, help me to number my days. It's so important. My days are so short, so brief, so frail. I want my time to count for your glory, Lord. So now he says, what do I wait for? My hope is in you. That's the key to this song. My hope is in you. And did God bring him through it? We know the story, the end of the story. God did bring him through all these trials. And David lived a triumphant life. Yeah, he had other problems that we won't get into today. But that's the subject of a psalm like Psalm 32 or Psalm 51. And we looked at Psalm 32 a while back, where it was a psalm of confession for his sin. So, God is his hope. Hear my prayer, Lord, verse 12. Give ear to my cry. And we know he's going to hear. He may not answer the way we want him to, how fast we want him to, but he does answer. And so stop looking at me. He says, God, please stop looking at me. That's kind of like what Job was saying to God. God, you're paying me too much attention. Leave me alone for a while. Stop looking at me and noticing and punishing me for all my wrongs. I need relief and I need deliverance, he says in verse 13. And then I love this expression in verse 13. We might miss it if we don't look carefully at it. Oh, spare me that I may recover strength. I think the idea of recovering strength has the idea, in fact, I would translate it, that I may smile again. That I may be happy again, that I may recover my strength, that I may actually be happy and be able to break forth with a smile. I want to be able to smile again. And then he says, soon I will depart this life. I will be no more. Please, Lord, help me before my life is over. So let's face it, as we come to our conclusion, we all have these kinds of protests at times. When do we express them? When we do express them, we need to make sure not to sin when we express it, and we need to take them to God. We must acknowledge the brevity and the futility of our lives. Only what's done for Christ will last. Don't ever forget it. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. God does discipline us. Let us accept discipline from Him and learn from it. And through it all, let's find our hope in the Lord. He will enable us to smile again. I've gone through some dark periods in my life. I think some of you have probably gone through some dark periods in your life. And I've learned over the years not to despair in those dark periods, because I've seen time and again, God will bring me through it. Don't you ever forget, He will bring you through it. Most people give up just before they get through the tunnel. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to make that terrible mistake. Any final thoughts before we have our prayer time? Comments? Thoughts? Okay, let's go to our prayer bulletins. I've made some changes. I'm thankful that I don't know why I always forget to bring a pen, but I have a pencil right here. In fact, here's a pen. Okay, I have so many of them at home. Let's look at our missionaries first. I've made a couple updates on missionaries. Well, at least one. I've added an update for P.D. Cherian. He mentions in his most recent prayer letter that the college has lost financial support from some significant partnering churches that have been supporting them for like 30 years.